is our, what we call a keto community meeting. And it is an opportunity for those of you who are interested in learning about keto, who maybe have an interest in trying keto and feel like that you could use a little bit of support throughout the week. That's what this meeting is for. That's why we're here. And we will meet on the second Saturday of each month in the same location. One thing I would like to start with, we are talking today about the brain, and the name of the workshop today is Don't Blame the Brain. And the reason that it's named that is because so often I think we assume that if we have memory problems, or if we have a decline in our cognitive capacity, or if we feel like we're just have this kind of vague thing of brain fog, that it's just an inevitable part of life, and that it just happens the older you get, or whatever. Maybe sometimes it happens even when we're younger. And so today we're going to talk about whether or not that's actually true, and if there's something that we can do about it. So the brain is a really important organ in our body. It actually consumes about 20% of our body's energy, which is a lot. And when I was a little girl, I had two older brothers. I'm going to tell this little story on them. They'll appreciate it, though. They were both athletes, and they played different sports, but they both played basketball. And in basketball, occasionally you'd get a player on the team who just always wanted the ball, was always getting the ball, was always shooting, maybe shooting from too far out, not able to hit their baskets. And everybody else would kind of, roll their eyes and think, oh, this is a ball hog. We've got a ball hog on our team. Of course, that's probably an old term. But with reference to the body, the brain is an energy hog. It's an energy fuel hog. It needs a lot of energy in order to function properly. So if you can kind of just get that idea in your mind going forward, I think that will be very, very helpful. If you didn't get to see my first presentation on the basics of the keto diet, and it really covered a lot of just the practical aspects of how to go keto, and it also covered a lot of other things, please check that out, and I can send you a link on that if you are interested. Just make sure that you leave your information for me. So the content of my presentations are going to be information that I get from experts in the field, from medical doctors, from PhDs, and from other types of research scientists that have invested an awful lot of time and energy in this topic. As always, don't change anything that you're doing with your medicines or your medical protocol unless you first consult with your physician. Nothing I say today is intended as medical advice. And today I'm going to be pulling a lot from a scientist who works in the Navy. It's kind of an interesting thing. Even though he hasn't specifically been addressing the ketogenic diet, he's indirectly stumbled into it because the research that he's done for the Navy revolves around oxygen toxicity and oxygen deprivation for the divers when they go down into the water and go down to certain depths. And they're trying to help prevent some of this phenomena. And so as a result of that, the Navy commissioned him to do his work in this area. And because of that, he was able to kind of segue in the direction of the ketogenic diet by using the literature and the studies and the papers that are already out there about the benefits of ketones for energy on the brain. So that's why we're going to be using his information today, and then there'll be other information that we'll also cover. So first, I want to just remind us, we talked about this in our last meeting, that what you really need for good science is you need what are known as RCTs, okay? Those are randomized, controlled clinical trials. Those are the types of studies that are considered the gold standard. It's where they actually show cause and effect. An RCT is going to have two groups of people, and you're going to be able to compare with whatever it is you're trying to study. And so you've got one group that's going to be using the product, or in this case, eating the nutrition, and then the other group that won't be. And so that's the ideal way to study nutrition. Unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of RCTs when it comes to the ketogenic diet. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the very first paper that was written on the benefits of ketones for the brain, just the brain, was about 2008. So that's what, 14 years ago? So that's how recent the use of ketones and the understanding of ketones have actually been studied. The type of studies that we normally see in the nutritional world are not as effective, and they're not as helpful because they're what are known as epidemiological studies. So an epidemiological study is it's helpful and it can provide information, but you're showing association, you're showing correlation in an epidemiological study. You're not showing cause and effect. You're not showing what the scientific community calls the mechanism. What is it that is actually resulting in something else? So we just need to keep that in mind going forward. So Dr. D'Agostino's work is quite valuable, quite valuable. Here are 5 specific benefits of ketones to the brain. Number 1, ketones enhance brain energy metabolism or function. Ketones contribute to brain homeostasis within the neurotransmitters. Ketones are anti-inflammatory and therefore neuroprotective. Ketones are anti-convulsive, and ketones provide efficient fuel energy with no harmful side effects. So this is pretty significant. This is really very significant. And let's look at a couple of these so that we can kind of break it down. Let's look at number 2. So we've got homeostasis that ketones can benefit, and we've got neurotransmitter communication. You know, the neurotransmitters are like they communicate within the body. So first of all, what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is the phenomena where something is trying to equalize. It's trying to provide balance. It's trying to, from within, have an equilibrium. So, for example, in the body, our body likes to try to create homeostasis with our blood sugar. The body does not want too much sugar. It does not want too little sugar. It wants just the right. So it's constantly working to create homeostasis within the blood for our blood sugars. So that's just one example. So that's why this is awfully important when we're talking about the nervous system, we're talking about the brain, we're talking about neurons. And then let's look at number 4. Ketones are anticonvulsant. So this goes back to the early 1920s when it was discovered that children especially, but people with epilepsy, if they were to eat a high-fat, very high-fat diet, I think the ratio was 4-to-1 of fat, and then the 1 would be a combination of carbohydrates and protein. 4-to-1 fat to proteins and carbohydrates, they could eliminate their seizures. And it worked. Now that's a very hard diet. It's a very hard diet to stick to when you think about that, but they were able to do that. So there was a lot of emphasis on eating a very strict ketogenic diet back in the early 1900s. Since then, we now have medicines that if you have epilepsy that you can take, and you don't have to go on such an extreme diet. But so anyway, that was when we first started really understanding the benefit of ketones. So back to Dr. D'Agostino, he built on the research in the epileptic community. And so his findings and the findings from the epileptic community have provided great hope for like people with traumatic brain injury, also some types of dementia. You know, dementia is a really broad term. It can mean a lot of different things. And so, it's a wonderful thing. And so we're indebted, very much indebted. Okay, so let's go back to number 2. Ketones contribute to brain homeostasis within the neurotransmitters. So let's talk a little bit more about the neurotransmitters, because this is a workshop on the brain, and so it wouldn't be complete without a discussion of our neurotransmitters. If we view our body as a building or as a home, in the structure of the home or the building, we have electrical wiring. When the wiring is working properly, the electricity that's sent to the house can be channeled properly through the electrical wiring. And when we go to switch on our light switch, the lights come on. When we need to run a kitchen appliance, go in the kitchen and turn on the blender and it will work. If we have to run air conditioning, in the summer, on and on and on, heat in the winter, the electrical wiring is what makes all of that possible. So it's important. So the electrical wiring is very, very similar to the neurotransmitters in the body and the brain. Neurotransmitters are like chemical messengers. So they're communicating and sending instruction. And they're sending the messages are being sent from the brain to muscles, to glands, to organs, to nerves, and then they go back to the brain. So this process is extremely important to regulate all the necessary functions, including psychological and mental functions, such as concentration, mood, mental clarity, memory, depression, anxiety. So that's why these findings on number 2, that they contribute to the neurotransmission communication that's taking place between the brain and the rest of the body is very significant. The problem, however, is that the standard American diet is not a diet that promotes ketosis, which is what you get when you're burning ketones and you get your ketone level up to a certain point. You actually go in to a fat adaptive state called ketosis. You can actually be fat adaptive and not quite be burning a lot of ketones, because there's a real range of burning ketones. But the standard American diet does not provide ketones for energy. The standard American diet provides glucose. So, and that's because we've been encouraged to eat based on the food pyramid. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we're primarily using glucose for energy and not ketones. So, so this is something that we really need to reconsider, really need to think about, because if you think about it, if a ketogenic diet was able to actually help, and still can help, a person who's suffering with epilepsy to no longer have seizures, that's pretty profound a diet, right? I mean, I don't know of any other diet that has ever been able to make that claim. So that in and of itself, that knowledge that this has actually helped epileptics with their seizure control, that's a very important point that we need to keep in the forefront. Okay. N equals 1. What is N equals 1? Well, it's kind of a math term, obviously. It's like an equation. But in the ketogenic community, we have kind of co-opted that expression, and we've very effectively been able to take advantage of the idea that, okay, so maybe there aren't a whole lot of studies, like I was talking about earlier, RCTs, that can actually demonstrate cause and effect and can show the mechanism for good health. There aren't a lot of studies for those. There are some, but a lot of times they're kind of brushed off to the side for various reasons. But we individually can become a study. I'm a member of the N equals 1, and I have other friends who are a member of the N equals 1 community, because we have taken it upon ourselves to try to switch our bodies over from being glucose burning for fuel to fat burning for ketones to see what that might do for us. So this is kind of probably a good time for me to share a little bit about how I first learned about the keto diet. About 4 years ago, it was really, really popular, and there were a lot of people talking about the keto diet, and there were, products were just coming out, keto types of products that you could go to the store and buy, and then people were talking about medium chain triglycerides, or MCTs for short, and also bulletproof coffee, and all of that was kind of like at the pinnacle. And I asked a couple of people, I said, what is this? What is a keto diet? What does this mean? And neither of them could really explain it to me. And I thought, well, this is weird. You don't really know what it is, and yet you think it's great, Of course, they were buying a lot of the products and trying to lose weight by using keto products. So then a little while later, my husband, who is a professor and a pastor, he had a student that came up to him, and she had already graduated. He no longer had her. And she came up to him at some event. I don't know where they were. I wasn't with them. And she said, "Hi, Dr. Watkins, how are you?" And he said to me later, he said, for the life of me, I could not remember who this girl was. I just did not recognize her. And so evidently as they continued to talk, it occurred to him that she was abundantly heavier when she was in his class. We'll put it that way. And that she had lost so much weight, he did not know who she was. And so as the story went, she told him as they were talking that she had gotten married, and since getting married, they had wanted to start a family, but they couldn't get pregnant. And so there was some infertility there. And so she decided that she would try the keto diet to lose weight, because she'd heard a lot of talk about the keto diet. So she went on the keto diet. She lost an enormous amount of weight. I don't know exactly how much. And she's kept the weight off. She's been able to maintain the weight loss, and she has since conceived. And when she was talking to my husband, she had this little bundle of baby joy on her hip. And so it was kind of a neat little story, but when he came home and told me that, I thought, that is so fascinating. What is this diet? So that's when I kind of decided I would kind of dive in and see if I could figure out what the keto diet is. And so now, as I said, there are hundreds, there are thousands, probably millions of us in the N=1 type keto community who have actually been able to correct a lot of health issues. Most of them went into it initially for weight loss, because there's such an epidemic of people struggling with their weight, obesity now, and morbid obesity, which we never saw before the last, say, 15, 20 years. You just never saw that. But they've been able to, because of the ketones that their body is producing and the state of ketosis that they are in, they've been actually able to benefit in ways that they never ever dreamed possible. They have success stories that aren't just related, like I say, to substantial weight loss and maintenance, but it's really interesting. People with skin disorders like eczema and psoriasis and acne and rosacea, it disappears when they go keto, when they stay on a keto diet usually you need to be on a keto diet for about 3 months before you are actually going to get yourself fat adaptive and start seeing the benefits. But it doesn't take long. That's the other thing that's really surprising about this diet. It doesn't take long. 3 months is not very long, and most of the time you'll start seeing results before 3 months. People have been able to eliminate symptoms from autoimmune disease, and autoimmune disease is rampant. And this is also a relatively new phenomenon. You didn't hear autoimmune disease when I was a young adult. I'm 64 now, but you just never heard of it. And all kinds of food intolerances and allergies, they've been able to eliminate those. They've seen improvement in their heart health with healthy cholesterol numbers, and that doesn't necessarily mean low cholesterol. That means low triglycerides and high HDL, or your triglycerides would be maybe half as high as your HDL. And everything comes down. They have experienced lowered blood sugar, and many type 2 diabetics have eliminated their diabetic symptoms. They hesitate to say they're cured, and it's probably wise not to, but if you don't have any symptoms of something, that's the next best thing to being cured. Epileptic seizures, as we mentioned earlier, people with Lyme disease have seen their symptoms subside. People have been able to eliminate arthritic joint pain, relieve the symptoms of fibromyalgia, and on and on. And they've also been able to experience the wonderful benefits of the mental and psychological relief and improvements in some very significant ways. For example, people with chronic depression have seen great improvement. People with just mental irritability or emotional irritability, early dementia. You know, when you get too far into dementia or Alzheimer's, the brain is so altered that there's not a whole lot you can do, but early stages, definitely. Brain fog, mental confusion. In the N=1 community, we have seen, and every one of these items in the category to the right, I have experienced, and I wasn't expecting any of it. I was just deciding that this sounded like a good diet to try, and it seemed healthy, and so I was going to try it and see how I felt. And so I never expected any of this. I thought, well, maybe I'll drop a few pounds. You know, I didn't really care so much about that, but I was interested in health and fitness. So I've experienced, and others have experienced, mental clarity, improved memory, mental stability, decrease in anxiety, emotional strength, and overall improved concentration. So this is significant. It's very significant. And regarding dementia, I want to talk a little bit about, Alzheimer's. So I'm not making any claims here. I tried to be very careful not to do that. But it's really interesting that the medical community now is, many times they're willing, this information has been out there for a while, but now they're willing to acknowledge that Alzheimer's is diabetes of the brain. And some people have even tagged it type 3 diabetes. So diabetes is something that we're also seeing a huge number of increase in. Pre-diabetes, diabetes type 2. Of course, diabetes type 1 is when your pancreas cannot produce any insulin, and so that's kind of a different category. But for example, diabetes type 2 used to be considered an old person's disease. You didn't get diabetes type 2 unless you were probably over the age of 50 or 60. Now we have children as young as 5 and 6 and 7 who are getting type 2 diabetes. This was never seen before, ever. This is a really, really scary new phenomena that's very serious. So Alzheimer's, dementia, more than likely, a lot of it is related to our nutrition, the high amount of sugar that we are consuming, and the need for insulin in order to metabolize that sugar. There's just so much that could be said about that, but I just wanted to share that to make sure. The other thing that's really sad, and I attribute this to our diet because of the way in which we're encouraged to eat so many carbohydrates, which gets metabolized into sugar, is that not only are young children starting to see alarmingly high rates of type 2 diabetes, but they're also seeing alarmingly high rates of fatty liver disease. That's another condition that was never seen in children. It was always only seen in adults who drank, and it would be called alcoholic fatty liver disease. Well, this is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Very, very serious. But what is really profound about both of those two diseases, they can be reversed on the ketogenic diet. And many people in the N=1 community have given their accounts and their experiences and how they have corrected all their symptoms from both type 2 diabetes and with fatty liver. Time to segue from talking about such problems as diabetes, type 1, type 2, possibly type 3, or Alzheimer's, and the increase in illnesses related to too much sugar in our body, to talk about ketones and ketosis. So here's what we want to know concerning burning ketones for energy or fuel. The metabolic state of burning fat, or ketones for energy and not glucose, is what ketosis is. So let's look at the first image here, the first picture on the left. That, number one, is just reiterating that we need to greatly reduce our carbohydrates, because without doing that, we cannot burn ketones. We cannot produce ketones, and we cannot burn them like we need to. Number two, when we do greatly restrict our carbs, our liver will very effectively produce ketones from the fat that we're consuming. Remember, keto is a low-carb, high-healthy fat, high-protein diet, or moderate protein, but some people prioritize their protein more than their fat. Then number three, ketones break into energy, which is the alternative energy source to glucose. And then as a result, the body starts adapting to this new energy source. Instead of sugar or blood glucose, we're now burning ketones for fuel. And what are the benefits that we know of from ketones? Well, we have the assistance to the epileptic community with controlled seizure impulses. We have no trouble maintaining muscle mass. We reduce our inflammation. We have improved brain health. We reduce our blood sugars. We reduce our hunger. We have improved mitochondria health, and some within the medical community are looking very hard and close at the connection between cancer and the mitochondria health in all of our cells. And lastly, we have enhanced athletic performance, and again, I can vouch for that, because in order to be involved in sports, you have to have energy. You just can't, be a couch potato, so to speak. And I have never seen such an increase in energy that I have experienced since going keto. That was another thing that I didn't expect. I had no idea that was going to occur, and it's really been a wonderful, wonderful surprise. But let's look at the image there of let's see, which one was I going to talk about? Oh yes, reduced hunger. Reduced hunger. So it's so important that you understand, if you're going to reduce your carbohydrates, you've got to up your fat and you've got to up your protein. Now, like I said, I alluded to just a few minutes ago, some people prioritize protein and they get their fat through their protein by eating fatty meat, fatty fish like salmon, sardines, high fat content, ground beef. Lamb is also very high in fat. When you eat poultry, eat the fattier cuts, keep the skin on. So that kind of thing. So actually, that's how I get my fat. I just greatly reduce my carbs to like 20 grams or less. Not to lose weight, but that's what I, in order to get the most out of this diet, it's 20 grams or less for me. But I eat as much as I want of high, healthy protein and fat. And that is the way that you have reduced hunger. Okay? That's the way you do it. You have to increase your other two macronutrients. We have 3, and we're going to talk about them in a minute. And fat and protein are your most important macronutrients. So just to kind of sum it up, for the brain, we're going to take it back to just our discussion on the brain, although there are so many other benefits, really and truly, to the ketogenic diet. But in reference to the brain, we want the brain to be using ketones for energy and fuel. And we want to get the brain off of glucose, which requires insulin. With ketones, there's nothing else that's necessary. You don't need anything else for fuel. With sugar, with glucose, which comes from carbohydrates, you have to use insulin in order to metabolize the glucose into energy or stored energy. So, and then you get into all the problems. The excess sugar results in excess glucose, which results in a lot of health problems, a lot of health issues, because primarily our bodies will become insulin resistant. And that's a whole nother topic that we're going to talk about at a later date. That might even be my next workshop is insulin resistance, because most of us are insulin resistant. And that's what, in fact, when we're calling Alzheimer's diabetes of the brain or type 3 diabetes, what we're really talking about is that the brain has become insulin resistant. So that's very important to know. But as I said, so going more in this direction, we have to understand a few basics on the ketogenic approach, and that involves your macronutrients. So these macronutrients are really necessary for us to learn about, to understand, and they're the 3 main dietary avenues by which we take food in, and then the body processes the food. There are only 3, which is really nice. I like that. Keeps it all kind of simple. But you have fat, you have protein, and you have carbohydrates. And your dietary fat gets used as fatty acids within the body. Dietary protein gets used as amino acids. And if you eat animal protein, there's no conversion process that must take place. If you're looking to the plant kingdom to get your protein, then you must recognize that there has to be a conversion process that your body has to kind of troubleshoot to get that level of complete amino acid. Such as, when you eat beans and rice, the reason most people combine those 2 is because beans alone or rice alone is not enough. It won't form the proteins that your body needs. So when somebody doesn't eat meat products, then they have to really understand how to get their amino acids. And sometimes they don't get them like they should, because it's kind of a complicated thing, and your body has to have all the other elements present in order to do that conversion process to achieve a complete amino acid. So those top 2 are what we call essential. That means your body doesn't make them. You have to eat them. That's really what that means. You have to eat them, and your body has to have them, okay? Protein and fat, those are the only 2 essential macronutrients. The third one, your carbohydrates, is everything other than animal products, basically, and dairy. You have grains and seeds, nuts, vegetables, fruit, beans, legumes, and all the processed foods that you can make from those, okay? Now, carbohydrates, most people aren't exactly sure what all the carbohydrates are. And it's so interesting to talk to somebody for the first time that's hearing this for the first time, and you're explaining to them that, for example, a fruit is a carbohydrate. And they're thinking, a fruit is a carbohydrate? I thought a fruit was just a fruit. Or, that something else like broccoli is a carbohydrate. I didn't know broccoli was a carbohydrate. I just thought broccoli was a vegetable. And so we need to know what carbohydrates are and what they are not. We need to know also that there are no essential carbohydrates. So you do not have to eat them. This goes against and flies in the face of just about everything that I was told growing up, and that I told my children when they were growing up, and what I fed them when they were young. And so yeah, there's a lot more that could be said about that. So there are two ways the body can get fuel or energy. It can get fuel or energy by metabolizing fat or by metabolizing carbohydrates. It doesn't have to have both, and it only really requires one, and that is fat. So if you leave today with that information locked in there, I'm going to feel very proud. So as I said, the essential macronutrients are protein and fat. And the protein that I prioritize is animal protein because it is the most bioavailable. And so that includes all kinds of meats. You see the bacon up there. Bacon is fine. Don't worry about bacon. The nitrates and nitrites are not really the concern that we've been told. You probably consume more of that in vegetables, and primarily celery has very high amounts of that than the amount that you would get in the bacon from the curing process. When you eat poultry, you want to eat the fattier cuts. You want to eat the thighs, you want to eat the legs, and you want to eat the skin. And don't worry about frying it. You can fry it, just don't bread it. And be sure you don't use vegetable oils when you fry your foods, and we'll talk more about that. So those are your proteins. Oh, also I wanted to mention that with your beef, there's a big kind of debate between grass-fed and grain-fed. And I would say, for now, don't worry about that. Just start eating it. Stop being afraid to eat red meat. I've eaten both, and actually I like the taste of grain-fed better. And grass-fed is usually very lean and doesn't have a lot of fat in it, and I like the other, so that's what I eat. And I'm just flourishing on it. But I want to say that just like in the world of music, all of our children played instruments growing up, and the piano is considered the king of the instruments in the musical world. Well, in the ketogenic world, as far as protein goes, ruminant animals rule. Ruminant animals rule. So a ruminant animal is an animal that has multiple rumens or stomachs, and they chew their cud, they regurgitate, they chew their cud, they swallow, they regurgitate, and then this process occurs over and over again, and it passes in between all the stomachs. And I'm not an agronomist, so I don't have all the the details of it, but evidently ruminant animals have the right bacteria in their rumen or their stomachs, and that bacteria is able to break down and convert the grasses that they eat as an herbivore into fats and proteins that are supreme for the human body. It's like the most nutrient-rich protein comes from ruminant animals. So you do the homework on which animals are ruminants, but obviously the cow. The cow is a ruminant. And if all you ever ate in the way of protein was all of the different meats that you can get from the cow, you'd be fine. I happen to really love bacon. I love bacon, and so every morning I usually have bacon along with my husband, and we get our protein and our fat in that way. So the other types of fats that you want to be thinking about are either tropical oils. They're also called fruit oils. Those would be oils like, and there may be more than these three, but obviously off the top of my head, I know of coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. So those fruit oils are higher in saturated fat and also monounsaturated fat, I believe, and they're very good for you. They're safe. I mean, you do have to kind of think about the smoke point, and how high you could like sauteing with them isn't always great because of the smoke point. So you have to watch that, I think. Butter has a low smoke point. Butter is also a really good fat. Of course, that's an animal product. And then also, there's a picture of a pile of fat there on the top right-hand corner. That's probably beef tallow. We used to cook with beef tallow a lot. Our ancestors, our great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, they either cooked probably with bacon drippings, which is the same as lard, or they would make lard, which is to render large pieces of pork fat down and make your fat that way. Beef tallow and also suet. Those were the staples for thousands and thousands of years. All the generations that have come before ate animal fats, and they cooked in animal fats. And animal fats are high in saturated fat, so they're solid at room temperature, and they have a little bit of a shelf life if you keep them covered and keep them sealed. And I can remember stories of my mother talking about, having food that was, cooked with saturated fat or animal fat, and they would just cover the table, they would just cover it up, and then they would eat the food that evening, the same food that was left out on the table, and nobody ever got sick. And it was because all of that food was either had animal products in it or it was cooked in some type of animal product. So let's now take a look to just kind of review kind of how we got where we are and where we need to go. And so we're going to look at the food pyramids. We have the keto food pyramid and we have the standard American diet food pyramid. Well, now who put that in there? Let's see, what have we got? For the standard American diet, at the bottom we have, which is the biggest portion, we've got Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell, Subway, Chipotle, Pizza Hut, Dairy Queen, and Coke. No, not really, I'm just teasing. But as far as fast food goes, there's some real truth there. Okay, so this is an honest to goodness comparison of the two different food pyramids from either keto or the standard American diet, which is also quite accurately referred to as the SAD diet. We've talked about this in the past, but at the base of the pyramids, that's the majority of the food that we're eating. And in the keto, it's primarily meat, eggs, and dairy with oils and fats. And then you go up, you're going to be eating green vegetables, non-starchy green vegetables. Like if you want to try to get it into your head as far as what a non-starchy green vegetable would be, use the alphabet. So A, asparagus, B, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, C, cabbage, cauliflower, cucumber, and then there are others, I think mushrooms, or I like to eat mushrooms when I go out because instead of getting 2 sides, I'll get 2 orders of mushrooms because they're very low in sugar. So those are some examples of non-starchy vegetables. I think I mentioned cauliflower, yeah. And then seeds and nuts. As you go up the keto pyramid, you want to reduce the amount of seeds and nuts. They do have healthy fat, but they also have carbohydrates. And remember, this is all about reducing the number of carbs. And then at the very top, you have berries. The only berries that are recommended on the keto diet are the only fruit that's recommended are berries because they have the lowest rate on the glycemic index, or they have the lowest sugar content. The standard American diet is like the keto diet turned upside down, minus the bread, the cereal, the rice, the pasta, the legumes, the beans, all of the things that we don't even eat. If you look over at the bottom of the food pyramid on the left, no bread, no pasta, no sugar, no pasteurized milk. Raw milk, I would say, is excellent. We drink raw milk in our home. No corn, no beans, and no rice. So those things that require glucose to metabolize the sugar from are totally eliminated. But over in the standard American diet, that's predominantly what we've been told to eat. So you can see the difference there. So what do we do first, second, and third? How do we get to where we can be providing the proper nutrition for our bodies and for our brain? Okay, how do we do this? Well, I would say that the very first thing we have to do is we have to get rid of all the vegetable oils. Every last one of them needs to be taken out of your house and out of your life. And everything that you read when you go to buy something, of course, if you're buying processed foods, which we really shouldn't be doing, you're gonna see that most of them have the soybean oil, they have the canola oil, they have the palm oil, and vegetable oils. This is a whole nother workshop as well, but vegetable oils are not even really vegetable oils. They're seed oils and they're industrialized. So these industrial seed oils, they're passed off as vegetable oils, but they're not. they are a new phenomenon. They are a recent phenomenon. They were created at the beginning of the turn of the century through Procter and Gamble, and they made a lot of money off of convincing women to cook with Crisco, and there's just this whole history that's very interesting, I think. But now the Harvard School of Public Health, Tufts University, the Mayo Clinic, and the American Heart Association encourage vegetable oils, and they consider them to be heart healthy. In fact, the reason that they're not healthy is not only because they are highly industrialized and they're made in a factory, which means that they're not time tested. I don't know of any randomized controlled trials that have ever been done to determine whether or not vegetable oils are really safe and can really, they're sustainable for good health. I don't know if they're there. I don't think they are. But they're also very inflammatory and very oxidative. And that's because of the ratio of omega-6 fatty acids to omega-3 fatty acids. And this is a very important point. You know, we hear a lot about omega-3 and how important omega-3 is. Well, omega-6 is also important. But with the standard American diet, you want more of a one-to-one relationship between your 3s and your 6s. If anything, your 3s can be a little bit higher. In the standard American diet, the omega-6 fatty acids are like 25 to 1 of the omega-3s. So, and a lot of that is because of these highly inflammatory vegetable oils that we're cooking with, and they prolong the shelf life, help prolong the shelf life of processed foods. So you can imagine that the food industry is not going to want to give up on those anytime soon. Okay, so now, other than getting rid of all of the vegetable oils that we have in our home and reading the ingredient list to make sure that we're not bringing any more home, is we need to think in terms of sugar. We need to eliminate all sugar. We need to eliminate all added sugar. We need to eliminate fruits that are just so hybridized now that they're primarily sugar bombs. It's interesting that 1 level teaspoon of sugar equals only 4 grams. So you remember when I said earlier that I eat about 20 grams of carbohydrates a day, roughly, sometimes less? That's not very many. That's not very many. But the reason I do that is because I feel the best when I eat like that. I feel amazing. At 64, I feel like I'm 24, honestly. And the other thing to know about this picture here, you see the teaspoon? It's a level teaspoon of sugar. Well, the body only wants somewhere between a half a teaspoon and a level teaspoon of sugar in its blood. Remember that homeostasis that we were talking about earlier in the workshop? That's all the blood needs, and that's all the body prefers and wants. So that's not very much sugar at all. And so we've created a huge burden on our bodies because we are consuming way more than this every single day. As a matter of fact, since the late 1700s, 1800s, and the Industrial Revolution and the ability to harvest and produce sugar, and it's become more and more available to us, whereas before in history it wasn't like it is today, our sugar consumption has gone up exponentially. So at the end of this graph, you're actually at about the year 2009, which was some time ago. And at that point, it was estimated that Americans consume a half a pound of sugar per day, which is 180 pounds of sugar per year. Way more than our body needs, way more. So this sugar is deceptive because it comes to us in all different ways. It comes to us not only when we make desserts, it comes to us in processed foods, comes to us in drinks, especially fruit drinks, but just soft drinks. And it comes to us in our fruits. It comes to us, we're giving our children fruit. And we want our children to be healthy, so we give them a banana, we give them an apple, we give them a bowl of grapes. And today's apple and banana and grapes are so different because they've been so altered and hybridized, so they're bigger and they have a higher sugar content. So we're really just putting such a terrible burden on our bodies with the amount of sugar that we are consuming. So those two things today in this workshop, if you can get that under your belt, no industrial seed oils, also known as vegetable oils, cut out all your sugar that you can possibly cut out, and then prioritize, number 3, prioritize your 2 macros that are essential, your fat and your protein, and make sure that you're satiated so that you're not as tempted as you might otherwise be to eat the foods that you know do not lead to optimal health. So, what do you see on this plate? You know what I see? I bet you see a plate of brownies, or a large brownie, right? I see a plate of mental decline. I see a plate of memory loss. I see a plate of foggy brain, a plate of interference with my brain to be able to operate at maximum capacity. I see a plate of potential, if not actual, eventual dementia and even Alzheimer's. So when I see a plate of brownies, I see a plate of real concern. And I grew up eating brownies, and my children grew up eating brownies. And you know, it's nothing better than to get the cold gallon of milk out of the refrigerator and get those hot brownies coming out of the oven and sit down to, you know, and I'm probably, you know, tempting everybody to want to run out and do that very thing right now, but don't do that. Don't do that. Reorient your thinking. Reorient your thinking. We want to eat things on our plates that are high in healthy fat and protein and not in carbohydrates. So I'm going to close with a story, another little story, and it involves a close relative of mine this person has been really very successful in life, been very financially prosperous, has excelled in his particular area of expertise. And when I was in my young 20s, I asked this person, I said, you know, what is it about you that has made you so successful? What do you think what does it take to become successful? And the answer was not what I was expecting. You know, I was expecting, go to school, get a college degree, study hard. You know, I don't know exactly what I was expecting. But what this person said was,